The Galactic Military Academy's mess hall buzzed with the usual cacophony of 1,000 different species trying to communicate. Clicks, whistles, harmonics, and telepathic static filled the air as cadets from across the galaxy shared meals and gossip. In the corner, at a table meant for 6, sat exactly one person. Cadet Sarah Chen kept her eyes fixed on her protein ration, methodically cutting it into precise squares. Around her, the conversations flowed in standard galactic, with occasional bursts of native languages when emotions ran high. She understood every word, every nuance, every casual insult thrown her way. The humans were always the subject of casual conversation among the other species. "Did you see the human in advanced combat theory?" A Zalarian cadet chittered to his tablemates, his crystalline voice carrying across the room. "She just sits there like a statue. Doesn't even take notes. Humans are known for their limited cognitive processing," replied a tall Vorthak, her forearms gesturing dismissively. "Their admission to the academy is purely political. The council needed to appear inclusive after the Treaty of Centauri." Sarah's grip on her utensil tightened imperceptibly, but her expression remained neutral. She had heard variations of this conversation every day for the past 8 months. The academy's most prestigious military institution had accepted exactly 12 humans in its 300-year history. Sarah was number 12. The acceptance letter had arrived on Earth like a miracle. No human had even applied to the academy in over 50 years, not since the disastrous performance of the previous human cadets had become legendary for all the wrong reasons. But Sarah's test scores had been impossible to ignore, even by the most prejudiced admissions committee. Now, sitting in the mess hall surrounded by beings who could see in 17 different spectrums, communicate through quantum entanglement, or bench press a hover tank, Sarah wondered if the test scores had been a fluke. Every class felt like swimming upstream against a current of casual dismissal and lowered expectations. Professor Keth 9, the Academy's premier strategic warfare instructor, had made his position clear on her first day. "Cadet Chen," he had announced to the entire lecture hall, his mechanical voice resonating through his translation device, "will serve as our control group. When studying battle scenarios, it will be illuminating to see how a species with limited tactical cognition approaches these problems." The other cadets had laughed. Sarah had simply opened her datapad and begun taking notes. The isolation wasn't entirely the others' fault, she had to admit. Her own personality had never been particularly social, even among humans. Growing up in New Singapore, she had preferred books and simulations to parties and social gatherings. Her parents, both military historians, had encouraged her academic pursuits but worried about her lack of friends. "You need to learn to work with others, Sarah," her mother had said during their last conversation before departure. "The military isn't just about individual excellence, but here at the academy, individual excellence seemed to be exactly what everyone expected her to lack." Sarah finished her meal in silence and gathered her belongings. As she stood to leave, she caught fragments of another conversation from a nearby table of senior cadets. "The war games next month should be interesting," a reptilian Threxian was saying. "I heard they're implementing new combat scenarios based on the Kepler-7 resistance movement." "Those were brutal campaigns," another cadet replied. "Guerrilla warfare in urban environments. Not the kind of thing you can solve with overwhelming firepower." Sarah paused at the mention of Kepler-7. She had studied every documented battle from that conflict, poring over tactical reports and survivor testimonies until she could visualize every street corner and supply route. The resistance had held off a vastly superior military force for 3 years using nothing but ingenuity and determination. As she walked toward the dormitory wing, Sarah's mind was already working through potential scenarios. The Academy's war games were legendary throughout the galaxy, complex simulations that had launched the careers of famous generals and admirals. They were also traditionally dominated by species known for their tactical prowess. The Zeth Collective with their hive mind coordination, the Arcturian Empire with their mathematical precision, and the Void Touched with their ability to process multiple probability streams simultaneously. Humans had never placed higher than last in the Academy's wargames. Sarah's dormitory room was small but functional, designed to accommodate the basic needs of any carbon-based life form. Her personal belongings took up very little space. A few books from Earth, a photo of her parents, and a simple wooden chess set that had belonged to her grandfather. The chess set was an anachronism in a world of holographic entertainment, but Sarah found comfort in the weight of the pieces and the grain of the wood. She sat at her desk and opened her personal computer, accessing the Academy's vast military database. While her classmates were likely socializing or attending recreational activities, Sarah dove into historical battle analyses. She cross-referenced tactical manuals from dozens of species, looking for patterns and weaknesses that might have been overlooked by more conventional military minds. The Kepler-7 conflict particularly fascinated her because it represented everything the galactic military establishment claimed was impossible, a technologically inferior force defeating a superior one through pure tactical innovation. The resistance fighters had turned their own weaknesses into strengths, using their limited resources and mobility to create chaos in the enemy's carefully planned operations. As she read, Sarah began to notice something that the official analyses had missed. The Resistance's success hadn't come from any single brilliant strategy, but from their ability to think differently about warfare itself. They had abandoned conventional military doctrine entirely, creating something new from desperation and creativity. Late into the night, as the Academy's artificial lighting dimmed to simulate planetary cycles, Sarah continued her research. Tomorrow would bring another day of being ignored in lectures and dismissed in tactical exercises. But for the first time since arriving at the Academy, she felt something stirring inside her that had nothing to do with fitting in or proving herself to skeptical classmates. She was beginning to understand that being underestimated might be the greatest tactical advantage she could possibly have. The Academy's central combat simulation chamber could have housed a small city. Its walls stretched upward for nearly a kilometer, lined with projection arrays capable of creating environments so realistic that cadets had been known to suffer actual injuries from psychological stress. Today it would become the theater for the Academy's annual war games. Sarah stood with the other cadets in the preparation area, watching as the simulation parameters loaded onto the massive displays. The scenario materialized before them. A sprawling urban environment based on the industrial world of Nexus Prime, complete with factories, residential districts, and a complex network of underground tunnels. The mission briefing appeared in standard galactic text across multiple screens. "Attention, cadets," announced General Vex Corvain, the Academy's commandant. His species, the Hegemony, were renowned for their military precision and had never lost a major conflict in over 2 centuries. This year's war games will test your ability to adapt, innovate, and overcome. You will be divided into 12 teams of 8 members each. Your objective is simple: secure and hold the central command hub while preventing other teams from achieving the same goal. Sarah felt a familiar knot form in her stomach. Team assignments at the Academy followed a predictable pattern based on species compatibility and tactical doctrine. She would likely be placed with the other minor species, those whose civilizations were considered peripheral to galactic military power. Team assignments are now being displayed. The general continued. You have 30 minutes to meet with your teams and develop initial strategies. The simulation begins at 1400 hours. Sarah found her name listed with Team 7 exactly as she had predicted. Her teammates were equally unsurprising. 2 Rillan traders whose species specialized in commerce rather than warfare. A Gorthak engineer whose people were known for their mechanical skills but not combat prowess. A pair of insectoid clique whose hive mind fragments made them excellent scouts but poor fighters. A crystalline resonant who could manipulate electromagnetic fields. And a single Terran exchange student named Marcus, who looked as uncomfortable as Sarah felt. They gathered in a small conference room adjacent to the main chamber. The atmosphere was tense with the weight of expected failure. Team 7 was clearly the Academy's designated underdogs, assembled from species that the instructors believed would provide interesting data points without seriously challenging the top-tier teams. "Well," Marcus said, breaking the awkward silence. "At least we're all in this together." Keth 92, one of the Rillan cadets, made a sound that translated roughly as a sigh. "We should focus on survival rather than victory. Team 1 has 3 Zeth collective members and a void-touched probability calculator. Team 4 is entirely composed of Arcturian tactical specialists. We cannot hope to compete with such advantages." The Gorthak engineer, whose name was approximately unpronounceable but translated as Ironright, nodded his massive head in agreement. Perhaps we could establish a defensive position and simply avoid elimination for as long as possible. A respectable showing would be better than early defeat. Sarah listened to the discussion with growing frustration. Her teammates were already defeated before the simulation had even begun. They were approaching the war games with the same conventional thinking that had made their species predictable and, ultimately, militarily irrelevant on the galactic stage. "What if we don't play their game?" Sarah said quietly. The conversation stopped. Her teammates looked at her with expressions ranging from confusion to skepticism. "Explain," said Zix-9, the resonant, its crystalline form shimmering with curiosity. Sarah stood and moved to the tactical display showing the Nexus Prime simulation. She had spent the previous weeks analyzing every detail of the environment, memorizing street layouts and identifying potential choke points, but more importantly, she had been thinking about the fundamental assumptions underlying the war games themselves. "Every team is going to fight for the central command hub," she said, highlighting the target structure on the display. "It's the obvious objective, so that's where all the major battles will take place. The strongest teams will establish perimeter control and force everyone else to attack fortified positions." "Yes," Marcus said slowly. "That's standard tactical doctrine. Secure the objective and hold it against all comers." "But what if the central command hub isn't really the objective?" Sarah continued. "What if it's just what they want us to think is the objective?" The Click Scouts clicked rapidly to each other before one of them spoke. "The mission parameters are clear. Secure and hold the central hub." Sarah smiled for the first time in months. "The mission parameters say to secure and hold the central command hub while preventing other teams from achieving the same goal. But they don't say that the central hub is the only command hub." She manipulated the display, zooming in on various sections of the urban environment. "Look at the infrastructure. Nexus Prime was an industrial world with redundant command systems. There are 3 other facilities that could theoretically serve as command hubs if properly activated and defended." Ironwright leaned forward, his mechanical expertise engaged. "You suggest we ignore the primary objective entirely?" "I suggest we redefine the objective," Sarah replied. "While 11 teams fight over one location, we establish our own command hub in a secondary facility. We turn this from a battle royale into asymmetric warfare." The room fell silent as her teammates considered the implications. What Sarah was proposing went against everything they had been taught about military strategy. It was the kind of unconventional thinking that could either lead to brilliant victory or spectacular failure. The judges would never accept such a strategy, Keth 92 protested. "It violates the spirit of the exercise." "Does it?" Sarah asked. "Or does it demonstrate exactly the kind of adaptive thinking that real military commanders need in the field?" The Kepler 7 resistance didn't win by following conventional doctrine. They won by rewriting the rules of engagement entirely. Marcus was studying the tactical display with new interest. "If we could actually establish a functioning command hub in one of the secondary facilities, we'd have legitimate claim to mission completion. The judging criteria are based on objective achievement, not methodology. But we would need to hold our position against potential counterattacks," Zix-9 pointed out. "Once the other teams realize what we're attempting, they may redirect their efforts toward stopping us." Sarah nodded. "That's where our supposed weaknesses become advantages. We're not expected to be a threat, so we'll have time to establish our position before anyone takes us seriously. And once they do notice us, we'll be fighting from prepared defensive positions while they're stuck in urban combat with each other." The Click Scouts clicked excitedly. Their species excelled at reconnaissance and infiltration, roles that would be crucial for Sarah's unconventional strategy. Ironwright was already calculating structural modifications needed to activate the secondary command systems. "This is insane," Keth 92 said, but there was a note of hope in the translation. "Completely contrary to established military practice." "Exactly," Sarah replied, "which is why it might actually work." As the 30-minute preparation period neared its end, Team 7 had transformed from a collection of resigned underdogs into something resembling an actual military unit. They had a plan that played to their unique strengths rather than trying to copy the tactics of more conventionally powerful species. Sarah felt a strange sensation as they prepared to enter the simulation chamber. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she wasn't trying to prove that humans could think like other species. Instead, she was about to demonstrate that sometimes thinking differently was the greatest tactical advantage of all. The war games were about to begin, and Team 7 was ready to rewrite the rules. The simulation materialized around them with stunning realism. Sarah felt the artificial gravity adjust to match Nexus Prime's slightly heavier pull, and the air carried the metallic taste of industrial pollution. Above them, the sky showed the orange-tinted haze of a world where massive factories operated around the clock. Team 7 materialized in the designated starting zone, a small plaza on the outskirts of the urban center. Around them, the other 11 teams were appearing in similar locations, each positioned at roughly equal distances from the central command hub that dominated the city's skyline. "Radio check," Sarah whispered into her communication device. The Academy's translation systems ensured that all team members could understand each other regardless of their native communication methods. "Click Scouts reporting ready," came the response from the insectoid duo, who had already begun analyzing the local terrain with their enhanced sensory capabilities. "Engineering systems operational," Ironwright confirmed, his massive frame already loaded with the specialized equipment they would need to activate a secondary command hub. The other teammates checked in rapidly. Sarah was pleased to note that their unconventional strategy seemed to have given everyone a sense of purpose they had lacked during the planning phase. "Remember the plan," Sarah said as they began moving toward their chosen target. "We avoid all contact with other teams for the first phase. Speed and stealth are our primary advantages right now." They had selected Industrial Complex 7 as their objective, a massive manufacturing facility located in the opposite direction from the central command hub. While the other teams would be converging on the city center, Team 7 would be moving away from the action entirely. The Click Scouts led the way, their natural abilities allowing them to detect movement and energy signatures from considerable distances. Their reports came back in rapid clicks that the translation system converted to tactical updates. "Clear path through the residential district," one scout reported, detecting movement 2 kilometers north. "Appears to be Team 3 advancing toward Central Hub. Multiple energy signatures from the eastern approach," the second scout added. "Heavy weapons charging. Teams 4 and 9 appear to be preparing for immediate engagement." Sarah smiled grimly. The conventional teams were already positioning themselves for the kind of massive battle that would characterize traditional war games. While they focused on establishing firing positions and siege lines around the central hub, Team 7 slipped through the abandoned outskirts like ghosts. Ironwright proved invaluable as they navigated the industrial terrain. His species' natural affinity for mechanical systems allowed him to identify structural weaknesses and alternative routes that other teams would have missed. When they encountered a collapsed overpass blocking their direct route, he quickly located maintenance tunnels that allowed them to bypass the obstacle entirely. "Industrial Complex 7 in sight," Marcus reported as they crested a small hill overlooking their target. The facility sprawled across several square kilometers, its towering smokestacks and manufacturing units creating a maze of potential defensive positions. Sarah studied the complex through her tactical scope. The simulation had rendered it in impressive detail, complete with automated systems that could theoretically be reprogrammed to serve their needs. More importantly, the facility's design included hardened communication arrays that could be modified to function as a command hub. "Zix-9, can you interface with those communication systems?" Sarah asked. The crystalline resonance form shimmered as it extended electromagnetic senses toward the facility. "Affirmative. The arrays are using standard galactic protocols. I can establish command functions within approximately 20 minutes once we reach the primary control room." "Ironwright, how long to modify the facility's defensive systems?" The massive engineer consulted his equipment readings. "Automated manufacturing systems can be reprogrammed to produce basic defensive drones. Estimated time for operational capability 45 minutes. Sarah nodded. Their timeline was tight but achievable. The key was reaching the facility before any other teams realized what they were attempting. "Click Scouts, begin perimeter reconnaissance. I want to know about any approaching forces the moment they enter this sector." As her team spread out to begin their assigned tasks, Sarah felt the familiar weight of command responsibility. She had studied leadership theory extensively, but this was her first opportunity to put those lessons into practice. The simulation felt real enough that her decisions would have consequences, and her teammates were trusting her unconventional strategy with their academic standing. The infiltration of Industrial Complex 7 proceeded smoothly. The facility's automated security systems had been designed to repel external attacks, not to prevent occupation by forces already inside the perimeter. Ironright quickly identified the main control room and began the delicate process of interfacing with the manufacturing systems. "This is remarkable engineering," he commented as he worked. Nexus Prime's industrial designers created incredibly sophisticated automation protocols. I can reprogram these systems to produce surveillance drones, defensive barriers, even basic weapons platforms. Zix-9 had connected to the communication arrays and was systematically establishing command protocols. The resonance electromagnetic abilities allowed it to interact directly with electronic systems in ways that other species required bulky interface equipment to achieve. Command hub functionality. At 60% and rising, it reported, "I am detecting significant communication traffic from the central battlefield. Multiple teams have engaged in combat around the primary objective." Sarah accessed the facility's external sensors and brought up a tactical display showing the broader battlefield. As she had predicted, the majority of teams had converged on the central command hub and were locked in intense combat. Teams 1 and 4 appeared to have established the strongest positions, with the other teams either eliminated or forced into supporting roles. "Status report from scouts," came the voice of one of the clique. "Go ahead. Energy signatures approaching from the southeast. Single team moving carefully. Estimated arrival in 15 minutes. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. They were still at least 20 minutes away from full operational capability, which meant they would have to defend their position before their preparations were complete. "Can you identify which team?" "Negative. Too distant for species identification. But their movement pattern suggests reconnaissance rather than assault preparation." Sarah considered their options. They could abandon their current position and try to establish the command hub elsewhere. But there wasn't time to find another suitable facility. They could try to hide and hope the approaching team would pass by, but that left them vulnerable to detection, or they could prepare for combat while continuing their setup operations. "All teams continue current operations," she decided. "Prepare for defensive action but do not abandon primary objectives. Marcus, work with the Rillan traders to establish fallback positions throughout the facility. Use the manufacturing equipment as cover." Her teammates responded with the kind of efficiency she had hoped for but hadn't dared expect. Months of being dismissed and underestimated had forged them into a unit that understood the value of proving themselves. As the unknown team drew closer, Sarah realized that Team 7 was about to face its first real test. They had successfully avoided the main battle through unconventional thinking, but now they would have to prove that their strategy could survive contact with the enemy. The war games had just become very real, and Sarah was about to discover whether her faith in asymmetric warfare was justified or simply the delusion of an inexperienced cadet who had read too many historical analyses. Through the facility's sensors, she watched the approaching energy signatures grow stronger. In minutes, Team 7 would either validate their unconventional approach or become another footnote in the Academy's long history of failed human tactics. The approaching team emerged from behind a cluster of storage silos like predators stalking prey. Through the facility's external cameras, Sarah could see their distinctive markings. Team 11 composed entirely of Kethmorian shock troops. Their species was known throughout the galaxy for aggressive frontal assaults and overwhelming firepower tactics. "Command hub at 85% operational," Zix-9 reported. The crystalline beings formed pulsing with concentration as it worked to complete the communication protocols. "Defensive drones coming online now," Ironright announced. 3 spider-like mechanical constructs emerged from the facility's manufacturing bays, their sensors sweeping the perimeter for threats. Sarah watched Team 11 advance with professional interest. Their formation was textbook perfect, with overlapping fields of fire and mutually supporting positions. Against a conventional defensive setup, they would have been devastating. But Team 7 wasn't fighting conventionally. "Click scouts, fall back to interior positions," Sarah ordered. "Everyone else, remember the plan. We're not trying to destroy them, just convince them that this position isn't worth the cost." The Kethmorian troops reached the facility's outer perimeter and immediately began their assault. Energy beams lanced through the air, striking the industrial equipment that Team 7 had positioned as decoy targets. The attack was fierce and coordinated. Exactly what Sarah had expected from such a militaristic species. What they hadn't expected was for their targets to be empty. First phase complete, Marcus reported from his position deep within the facility. They're attacking the positions we wanted them to attack. Sarah smiled as she watched the enemy troops advance into the carefully prepared killing field. The manufacturing complex's layout created natural choke points and blind spots that could be exploited by defenders who understood the terrain. More importantly, the facility's own automated systems could be turned into weapons with the right programming. Ironright, activate the manufacturing diversion. With pleasure, the engineer replied. Suddenly, the facility's massive industrial equipment roared to life. Conveyor belts began moving at high speed, carrying loads of scrap metal and industrial debris. Steam vents opened, filling key corridors with concealing vapor. Most importantly, the facility's loading systems began dropping shipping containers in strategic positions, creating new cover and blocking previously clear sightlines. Team 11's perfect formation dissolved into chaos as their battlefield transformed around them. What had been open ground became an obstacle course, and their coordinated fire patterns were disrupted by moving barriers and obscuring steam. Now, Sarah whispered. The click scouts struck first, emerging from concealed positions to target Team 11's communication specialist. Their natural stealth abilities had allowed them to approach undetected, and their precise strikes disrupted the enemy team's coordination protocols. The Rillan traders, despite their species' reputation for commerce over combat, proved surprisingly effective at psychological warfare. Using the facility's communication systems, they began broadcasting false tactical reports and conflicting orders in perfect Kethmorian military dialect. Zix-9 contributed by manipulating the facility's electromagnetic systems, causing the enemy team's weapon targeting systems to experience intermittent failures, not enough to disable them completely, but sufficient to reduce their accuracy and increase their frustration. Enemy forces are becoming disorganized, Marcus reported. They're starting to question whether this facility is actually occupied or if they're fighting automated defenses. Sarah watched the tactical display as Team 11's assault began to falter. The Kethmorian troops were trained for decisive engagements against clearly defined enemies, not prolonged fights against an opponent who refused to engage directly. Their ammunition reserves were depleting while their strategic objectives remained unclear. Command hub at 95% operational, Zix-9 announced. I am now receiving and transmitting command-level communications across the entire battlefield. Network. The significance of this achievement wasn't lost on Sarah. They had successfully established a functional command hub while engaged in active combat with a superior enemy force. According to the War Games victory conditions, Team 7 had just completed their primary mission, but the real test was yet to come. Broadcasting surrender offer on Kethmorian military frequencies, one of the Rillan traders announced. Surrender offer? Sarah asked, confused. We are offering to accept their surrender, the trader clarified with what passed for a smile among his species. It seemed appropriate given our current tactical superiority. Through the facility's sensors, Sarah could see the effect this had on Team 11. The Kethmorian troops actually stopped firing and began arguing among themselves. The concept of surrendering to what they had assumed was a minor threat was so foreign to their military culture that they couldn't process the situation. Team 11 is withdrawing, the Click Scouts reported. They appear to be falling back toward the central battlefield. Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction mixed with disbelief. They had not only survived their first engagement, but had actually forced a superior enemy force to retreat without suffering any casualties themselves. The unconventional tactics that had seemed like desperate improvisation were proving effective against traditional military doctrine. Command hub now fully operational, Zix-9 announced. I am detecting communications from the Academy's monitoring systems. We have achieved mission completion status. But even as her team celebrated their success, Sarah was studying the broader tactical situation. The main battle around the central command hub was intensifying, with Teams 1 and 4 locked in a devastating stalemate that had already eliminated 3 other teams. More importantly, their victory over Team 11 wouldn't remain secret for long. Message incoming from Academy Command. Zix-9 reported. General transmission to all teams. Team 7 has established secondary command authority at Industrial Complex 7. All teams may now choose primary or secondary objectives for mission completion. Sarah felt her blood run cold. The Academy's judges had just validated their strategy by recognizing it as a legitimate mission completion. But they had also announced Team 7's position to every remaining team in the simulation. Multiple energy signatures approaching from all directions, the Click Scouts reported, their voices tight with alarm. It appears that several teams have abandoned the central battle and are converging on our position. Through the tactical display, Sarah could see the situation developing. Teams 2, 5, 8, and 10 were all moving toward Industrial Complex 7, apparently deciding that capturing the secondary command hub would be easier than continuing the brutal fight for the primary objective. Time to contact? Sarah asked. First wave arrives in 8 minutes. Full convergence in 12 minutes. Sarah's mind raced through their options. They could try to hold the facility against multiple enemy teams, but their successful defense against Team 11 had depended on surprise and preparation time they no longer possessed. They could abandon the facility and try to establish another command hub elsewhere. But there wasn't time to complete another setup before being overtaken, or they could do something that no military academy in galactic history had ever seen before. All teams, listen carefully, Sarah said, her voice carrying a confidence she didn't entirely feel. We're about to attempt something that will either make us legends or get us all eliminated in the next 15 minutes. She looked around at her teammates, these supposedly inferior cadets from minor species who had just proven that conventional wisdom was often neither conventional nor wise. We're going to fight 4 teams simultaneously, and we're going to win. Sarah stood in the facility's central control room, surrounded by holographic displays showing the approaching enemy forces. 4 teams, 32 elite cadets from some of the galaxy's most militaristic species, were converging on their position with the clear intent of overwhelming Team 7 through superior numbers and firepower. Ironright, status on manufacturing capabilities? I have 12 defensive drones operational with more coming online every 3 minutes, the engineer reported. The facility's industrial systems can produce barrier materials, but not fast enough to fortify all possible approach routes. Zix-9, what's our communication status? Full command hub functionality maintained, the resident replied. I am monitoring all enemy team communications and can provide real-time tactical intelligence. Sarah studied the tactical display, noting the different approach vectors and estimated arrival times. Team 2 was approaching from the north with characteristic Arcturian precision, their mathematical tactical doctrine evident in their perfectly calculated advance. Team 5 approached from the east, composed of Threxian shock troops known for aggressive close-quarters combat. Teams 8 and 10 were converging from the south and west respectively, their mixed species compositions making their tactical preferences harder to predict. The key to this defense isn't to stop them, Sarah announced to her team. It's to turn them against each other. Marcus looked up from his defensive preparations. How do we manage that when they all want the same thing? We make sure they can't all have it at the same time, Sarah replied. Zix-9, can you broadcast false communications on enemy frequencies? Affirmative. I can mimic the communication protocols of any species represented in the approaching forces. Sarah's plan began to crystallize as she studied the enemy positions and timing. The key was understanding that each team was approaching with the assumption that they would be fighting Team 7, not each other. If she could manipulate their perceptions and timing, she might be able to create a situation where the attackers became their own worst enemies. Click Scouts, I need precise timing on all approaching forces. Team 2 will reach outer perimeter in 4 minutes. Team 5, 30 seconds later. Teams 8 and 10 will arrive simultaneously 2 minutes after that. Perfect. 6-9, begin broadcasting. Send a message on Team 2's frequency. Using Team 5's communication signature, tell them that Team 5 claims priority access to the secondary objective and demands Team 2 withdraw. Immediately, the resonance form shimmered as it manipulated electromagnetic fields to create the false communication. Message transmitted. Team 2 is responding with colorful language regarding Team 5's parentage and tactical competence. Now send Team 5 a message from Team 2, questioning their courage and suggesting they're afraid to face Arcturian tactical superiority in direct combat. Through the facility's sensors, Sarah could see the effect of her psychological warfare. Both approaching teams had slowed their advance and were now broadcasting increasingly hostile messages to each other. The mathematical precision of Arcturian doctrine was clashing with Threxian pride in ways that were rapidly escalating beyond mere tactical disagreement. Teams 8 and 10 are requesting clarification from Academy Command regarding engagement protocols, 6-9 reported. They appear confused about whether they are authorized to engage other teams while approaching the secondary objective. Ignore their requests, Sarah ordered. Let them think there's been a communication breakdown. Uncertainty will make them more cautious and give us more time. Ironright had been working frantically to prepare their defenses, but his latest report was sobering. I have 18 drones operational, but they will not be sufficient against 4 full teams. We need to reduce the number of attackers somehow. We're working on it, Sarah replied, then turned back to the communications display. 6-9, patch me into Team 2's internal communication. Frequency. Done, you are now broadcasting. On Arcturian military channels, Sarah took a deep breath and began speaking in her best approximation of formal Arcturian tactical language. Team 2, this is Academy Command Tactical Division. We have detected unauthorized Threxian forces approaching your operational zone. Your orders are to secure the area and prevent Team 5 from reaching the secondary objective until proper engagement protocols can be established. There was a brief pause before Team 2's leader responded. Understood, Command. We will establish perimeter control and deny access to Threxian forces. Now broadcast to Team 5 using Academy Command authority, Sarah continued. Tell them that Team 2 has been detected using prohibited tactical enhancements and needs to be investigated before being allowed to continue their mission. The result was immediate and spectacular. Through the facility's external cameras, Sarah could see Teams 2 and 5 changing course to intercept each other, rather than approaching the industrial complex. Within minutes, the mathematically precise Arcturians and the aggressively straightforward Threxians were engaged in a fierce firefight that eliminated both teams from the simulation. 2 down, Marcus observed with admiration. But we still have Teams 8 and 10 approaching, and they just watch their competition eliminate each other. They're going to be much more suspicious of any communications they receive, Sarah nodded. The remaining teams would be harder to manipulate, but they also represented a more manageable threat. 16 enemies instead of 32 was still overwhelming odds, but at least it was theoretically possible. All defensive positions, prepare for engagement, she ordered. This time we fight them directly, but we fight them smart. Teams 8 and 10 reached the facility's perimeter almost simultaneously, approaching from opposite directions in a coordinated pincer movement that suggested they had established communication with each other. Their advance was cautious and professional, clearly influenced by watching the destruction of Teams 2 and 5. They're not taking any chances, one of the click scouts reported. Standard breach and clear protocols. Very systematic. Sarah watched their approach with growing respect for their tactical competence. These weren't the overconfident shock troops they had faced earlier, but experienced military cadets who understood the value of careful preparation and mutual support. Ironright. Deploy all available drones to create chaos in their formation. Don't try to eliminate them, just disrupt their coordination. 6-9, interfere with their targeting systems, but keep it subtle. I want them to miss shots they should make, not realize they're being jammed. Rillan traders use the facility's communication systems to create acoustic confusion, random industrial noise at maximum volume. Everyone else, remember what we learned from the Kepler-7 resistance. When facing superior forces, the goal isn't to win through strength. It's to make victory cost more than the enemy is willing to pay. As Teams 8 and 10 breached the facility's outer defenses, Industrial Complex 7 transformed into a hellscape of noise, confusion, and mechanical chaos. Sarah's team had turned the entire manufacturing facility into a weapon, using its own systems against the invaders in ways that no conventional military manual had ever anticipated. The battle for the secondary command hub had begun in earnest, and Sarah was about to discover whether human tactical innovation could overcome the combined military traditions of 2 different galactic civilizations. The industrial complex erupted into controlled chaos as Teams 8 and 10 breached the outer perimeter. Sarah's defensive strategy transformed the facility into a 3-dimensional battlefield where conventional military doctrine became a liability rather than an advantage. Ironright's defensive drones swarmed, through the manufacturing corridors like mechanical hornets, not seeking direct confrontation but creating constant harassment. They would emerge from ventilation shafts to disrupt enemy formations, then disappear into the facility's maze of pipes and machinery before return fire could eliminate them. Enemy forces are fragmenting, reported one of the Click scouts. Team 8 is attempting to secure the eastern manufacturing bay, but they keep losing contact with individual squad members. Sarah smiled grimly as she watched the tactical display. The attacking teams had trained for combat in open terrain or standardized military facilities, not in an active industrial complex where the environment itself was hostile. Every corridor could be flooded with steam. Every intersection could drop shipping containers as improvised barriers, and every room could fill with deafening machinery noise that disrupted communication. 6-9 status on their command structure. Team 10's leader is requesting immediate extraction for 2 wounded members, the resonant reported. Team 8 is demanding Academy Command provide facility blueprints, claiming the environment violates standard engagement protocols. Deny all requests. Let them think Academy Command is experiencing technical difficulties. Through the facility's internal sensors, Sarah could track the invaders' progress. They were advancing, but slowly and at tremendous cost in ammunition and morale. Every meter gained required clearing multiple defensive positions, and Team 7's unconventional tactics meant that cleared areas couldn't be considered secure. Marcus emerged from his position near the facility's central power systems, his face streaked with industrial grime. The Rillan traders have done something brilliant. They've figured out how to make the manufacturing equipment speak. Speak? Listen. Through the facility's communication system came a voice in perfect standard galactic. Warning. Unauthorized personnel detected in Sector 7. Initiating lockdown protocols. Warning. Toxic gas leak detected in Sector 12. Evacuate immediately. Sarah laughed despite the tension. The facility's own automated systems were now contributing to the psychological warfare, issuing false warnings and conflicting instructions that added to the attackers' confusion. Team 8 is requesting clarification on environmental hazards, 6-9 reported. They want to know if the gas leak warnings are real. Tell them Academy Command is investigating but recommend immediate protective measures, Sarah replied. Let them waste time and resources protecting against threats that don't exist. The battle reached its climax when Team 10's assault force finally reached the facility's central control room. Sarah found herself face-to-face with Cadet Vorth Kellen, a hegemony tactical specialist whose species had never lost a military engagement in recorded history. Surrender. Human, Vorth Kellen demanded, his translator rendering his words with the absolute confidence of military superiority. Your defensive strategy has been impressive, but you cannot hope to hold this position against concentrated assault. Sarah looked around the control room, noting her teammates' positions and the status displays showing their command hub's continued operation. They had held out longer than anyone could have expected, but conventional wisdom suggested that Vorth Kellen was correct. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running low on the improvised defenses that had carried them this far. You're absolutely right, Sarah replied calmly, which is why I'm not trying to hold this position. Vorth Kellen's expression shifted to confusion just as every display in the control room went dark. 6-9. Execute transfer protocol, Sarah ordered. Command hub authority transferring to backup facility, the resonant announced. Transfer complete in 3, 2, 1. Secondary command established at location designated sanctuary. Through his communication device, Vorth Kellen could hear his own team members reporting in confusion. Sir, all tactical displays show the command hub has moved. Our current position no longer registers as the objective location. Sarah smiled at the hegemony cadet's bewildered expression. Did you really think we would put all our tactical planning into holding a single facility? While you were fighting to capture this complex, my engineers were simultaneously establishing backup command systems in 3 other locations. It was a complete bluff, but delivered with enough confidence that Vorth Kellen hesitated. The truth was that 6-9 had simply transferred their command hub functionality to a backup server located in an abandoned warehouse 2 kilometers away. The Click Scouts had prepared the site hours earlier, but it was barely more than a temporary communication relay. But in the context of the war games, a functioning command hub was a functioning command hub, regardless of its sophistication. Teams 8 and 10 are requesting new orders, Zix-9 reported. They appear to be confused about whether their current mission remains valid. Maintain radio silence, Sarah ordered. Let them figure out their next move without guidance from Academy Command. Through the facility's sensors, she could see both enemy teams beginning to withdraw from the industrial complex. Having spent enormous resources capturing what they thought was the objective, they now faced the prospect of starting over, against an enemy who had already demonstrated the ability to outthink conventional tactics. This is Cadet Vorth Kellen requesting immediate consultation with Academy Command, the hegemony officer said into his communicator. We need clarification on objective parameters and engagement protocols. Academy Command is currently unavailable, Zix-9 replied, mimicking the formal tones of military bureaucracy. Please stand by for further instructions. As Teams 8 and 10 completed their withdrawal from the facility, Sarah felt the weight of what they had accomplished. Team 7 had not only survived simultaneous attacks by 4 different enemy forces, but had actually forced them to retreat through a combination of psychological warfare, environmental manipulation, and tactical innovation that had never been attempted in Academy history. Command hub secure at sanctuary location, the Click Scouts reported. Perimeter established and no hostile contacts detected. All team members report successful extraction from Industrial Complex 7, Marcus added. We're actually going to survive this. But even as her teammates celebrated their impossible victory, Sarah was studying the broader tactical situation. The main battle around the central command hub had finally concluded, with Team 1 emerging victorious through the kind of overwhelming firepower doctrine that had dominated galactic military thinking for centuries. Zix-9. What's the current status of active teams? Teams 1, 7, and 12 remain operational, the Resonant reported. Team 12 appears to have avoided major combat by establishing defensive positions in the urban outskirts. Sarah nodded. The war games had been reduced to 3 teams, each representing radically different approaches to military strategy. Team 1 had won through conventional superiority, Team 12 had survived through caution and defensive positioning, and Team 7 had succeeded through unconventional innovation. The final phase of the Academy's war games was about to begin, and Sarah realized that her team's greatest test still lay ahead. They had proven that human tactical thinking could overcome supposed physical and technological disadvantages, but now they would face opponents who had survived the same crucible through their own methods. The simulation was far from over, and the galaxy was watching. The Academy's central monitoring chamber buzzed with unprecedented activity, as faculty members and senior cadets crowded around displays showing the war games' final phase. What had begun as a routine training exercise had evolved into something that military strategists across the galaxy would study for decades to come. Professor Keth 9 stood before the main tactical display, his mechanical voice betraying a rare note of uncertainty. In 300 years of Academy war games, we have never seen tactical innovation of this magnitude. Team 7 has fundamentally altered the parameters of the exercise. General Vex Corvain nodded slowly. His 4 eyes focused on the data streams showing Team 7's impossible journey from expected last place to final contender. The human cadet's psychological warfare capabilities are concerning. She has demonstrated the ability to manipulate enemy decision-making in ways our traditional doctrine does not account for. But the real sensation was happening beyond the Academy's walls. Across the galactic communication network, footage from the war games had begun circulating with explosive virality. The image of a single human cadet orchestrating the defeat of multiple superior forces had captured the imagination of billions of beings who had never considered that the minor species might possess unique strategic advantages. On the industrial world of Kepler-7, the same planet whose resistance movement had inspired Sarah's tactics, crowds gathered in public spaces to watch the Academy feeds. Former resistance fighters who had survived the brutal occupation recognized their own innovative strategies being employed by a human they had never met. She fights like us, observed Korath Vane, a Calarian veteran whose guerrilla tactics had held off hegemony forces for 3 years. Not with strength, but with intelligence. Not with superior weapons, but with superior thinking. The Threxian Military Academy issued an emergency tactical bulletin analyzing Team 7's performance, with particular attention to their defeat of Team 5's shock troops. For a species that prided itself on aggressive direct combat, the psychological manipulation that had led to their elimination was both humiliating and instructive. Even more significantly, recruiting stations across human space reported unprecedented interest from young people who had never considered military careers. The sight of Sarah Chen proving that human tactical innovation could compete with galactic military doctrine had inspired a generation that had grown up believing their species was naturally inferior in matters of warfare. Inside the simulation, Sarah remained unaware of the galactic attention her performance was receiving. She stood with her team in their makeshift command center, studying the final tactical situation with the same methodical approach that had carried them this far. Team 1 controls the central hub with overwhelming defensive superiority, she observed, highlighting their positions on the tactical display. Team 12 has established a fortress position in the residential district with excellent sightlines and supply security. And we control a backup command facility that barely qualifies as a legitimate objective, Marcus added with a tired smile. How do we win from here? Sarah had been wrestling with the same question. Both remaining enemy teams had learned from watching Team 7's unconventional tactics. They wouldn't be susceptible to the same psychological warfare and environmental manipulation that had defeated the earlier opponents. We don't win, she said finally, at least not in any way that the Academy's victory conditions recognize. Her teammates looked at her with expressions ranging from confusion to concern. They had come too far to simply accept defeat now. Explain, requested Zix-9. Sarah manipulated the tactical display to show the broader strategic picture. Look at what we've actually accomplished. We've forced the Academy to rewrite their engagement protocols in real time. We've demonstrated that their assumptions about species-based tactical superiority are fundamentally flawed. We've proven that innovation can overcome conventional military doctrine. But we haven't won the war games, Ironwright pointed out. Haven't we? Sarah asked. The stated objective was to secure and hold a command hub while preventing other teams from achieving the same goal. We've done that. The fact that we've done it in ways the Academy didn't anticipate doesn't invalidate our achievement. Through their communication systems, they could hear increasing chatter from Academy Command as instructors debated how to conclude an exercise that had exceeded all their planning parameters. The war games had officially ended when Team 7 established their command hub. But the simulation continued because no one was certain how to declare victory in a situation that traditional military doctrine couldn't adequately describe. Team 7, this is General Vex Corvain, came a transmission on Academy Command frequency. Report to the central briefing chamber immediately. The exercise has been concluded. As they made their way through the Academy's corridors, Sarah noticed something unprecedented. Other cadets were actually looking at them with expressions other than dismissal or condescension. Some showed curiosity, others respect, and a few displayed what could only be described as awe. The central briefing chamber was packed beyond capacity. Faculty members from every department had assembled, along with senior cadets visiting military attachés from allied species, and what appeared to be a significant contingent of media representatives. General Vex Corvain stood at the podium, his expression unreadable. Cadets, you have participated in the most unusual war games in Academy history. The tactical innovations demonstrated during this exercise will require comprehensive analysis and potential revision of our strategic doctrine. He paused, studying the assembled teams. Team 1, your performance exemplified the tactical excellence that has made the Zeth Collective a dominant military force. Team 12, your defensive strategy demonstrated the value of careful positioning and resource conservation. Sarah felt her teammates tense as the general's attention turned to them. Team 7, he continued, your performance defies traditional classification. You have achieved tactical objectives through methods that our instructors struggle to categorize. You have demonstrated that military innovation can overcome supposedly insurmountable disadvantages. The chamber fell silent as General Vex Corvain accessed his personal communication device and activated the main display. Suddenly, the room filled with data streams showing galactic communication networks, news feeds, and social media platforms all focused on the same subject, Team 7's performance in the war games. What you may not realize, the general continued, is that your actions have had consequences beyond this academy. Across the galaxy, military strategists are analyzing your tactics. Resistance movements on occupied worlds are studying your innovations. Young beings from species long considered militarily irrelevant are applying to military academies for the first time in generations. Sarah stared at the display showing view counts in the billions, analysis pieces from major news networks, and recruitment videos from human military academies using footage from her team's performance. In the strictest technical sense, General Vex Corvain announced, Team 7 has achieved victory in this exercise by successfully establishing and maintaining command hub authority. However, their true achievement transcends the parameters of any single simulation. The general's expression shifted to something approaching a smile. They have reminded us that in warfare, as in all endeavors, the most dangerous opponent is not the one with superior firepower, but the one who refuses to accept that victory is impossible. As the assembled crowd erupted in discussion and analysis, Sarah felt a strange mixture of pride and uncertainty. She had set out to prove that humans could succeed at the academy, despite their species' reputation for tactical inadequacy. Instead, she had apparently inspired a galactic revolution in military thinking. The silent cadet who had spoken to no one had somehow found her voice, and the galaxy was listening. Months later, as recruiting officers reported that human military academy applications had increased by 3,000%, and as resistance movements across occupied territories began employing Chen Doctrine tactics, Sarah would reflect on the unexpected power of refusing to accept conventional limitations. She had come to the academy to learn how to think like a soldier. Instead, she had taught the galaxy how to think like a human.